Good day, everyone. I'm Alexis Brooks from Quest, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's Cloud Learning series on Oracle Move to Cloud in partnership with Oracle. Today, we'll be discussing Are You Ready to Move at the Speed of Cloud, presented by Bruno, Binkley, and Betsie Reynolds from Oracle. Before I pass the floor, here are some important housekeeping notes before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout the session, but please feel free to drop your questions in the chat section within Zoom, and we will answer them throughout the session. The session is being recorded and will be added to Quest Content Library. And at this time, I'm going to pass things along to Bruno to get started.
Right, good afternoon and welcome to our discussion on building your speed to cloud and the muscles that you need to get there. I'm Bruno Binkley. I'm responsible for engaging customers to share leading practices for Oracle Cloud implementation, where we have one goal: to support every Oracle customer on their upgrade to an Oracle Cloud application.
And hi, everyone. My name is Betsie Reynolds. I lead the transformation services team in Oracle Consulting. And our goal is to help our customers be empowered stewards of their Oracle system, especially when it comes to the people side of things, including transformation and change management.
Right. Well, in today's session, we'll discuss your opportunity with cloud and how cloud is different. We'll talk about our delivery confidence framework and where it focuses on cloud culture and what those best practices are and how we can help. We want to help every customer on their journey. And feel free during this conversation to put any questions you might have in chat. And we'll also plan for time at the end of the discussion to take your questions and do some Q&A. Well, every one of our on-premises customers is evaluating when and how to upgrade to one of our Oracle Cloud applications. Annually evaluating, is this the year that we stay or go? So I'm curious, for this audience that's with us today, where are you in your decision process? How many of you are actively evaluating upgrade cloud? Maybe you're in your journey, or maybe you've concluded. So we're going to have a little poll for the audience. You should see it pop up and take a few minutes here to give us some feedback. Alexis, how are we doing on feedback?
Getting a few answers.
Yeah?
So yeah, let me go ahead and end it and share the results.
All right. So we've got a couple who are not moving anytime soon, but glad you're here on the call. We'll give you some tips and tricks on how to get started. Many that are considering move. So that's the perfect conversation. For those of you in the middle of your journey, right, hopefully we'll give you some lessons learned and some best practices maybe you can incorporate into your toolkit. And for those of you that are in the cloud, we've got some things for you as well. So ultimately, for those customers who decide to move to the cloud or have already made the decision to start their journey, they're embarking on that journey, and they're in that journey for a reason. It's usually to drive some component of enterprise value. We typically find 6 strategic objectives that stand out as common drivers of value. Those are standardization of processes, technology, and operation. We're going to talk a little about that today. Scalability to support growth, agility to support flexibility, and pivot and be resilient as the economy and the business conditions change. Modernization of the enterprise capabilities, a very popular area of focus. Talent transformation to drive new experiences, drive retention, and increase performance. And becoming a data-driven enterprise, right, to drive new business insights to the business. And our customers leverage Oracle Cloud capabilities as an enabler to achieve these objectives. Go to the next slide. Every upgrade to the cloud is an opportunity to reimagine how people, process, and technology and innovation can support those objectives and drive value. When we think about people, Oracle Cloud has embraced digital transformation to find ways for people and technology to work together to get things done more quickly, accurately, and consistently, changing how both IT and the business interact with technology. What's the opportunity? the business can reimagine how people, teams, and other coworkers collaborate, how they manage work, how they leverage automation, and how they utilize data to drive the business. When we think about process, Oracle Cloud applications operate a little bit differently than our on-premise applications. So they operate more efficiently, and they can be extended in ways that weren't possible previously. To develop our Oracle Cloud applications, we didn't port our legacy solutions to the cloud. We engineered new end-to-end processes, introduced modern best practices, and have developed processes that are based on a single source of truth, right? Available to all users of the platform to support the most critical business functions. So what's the impact? The business can leverage new end-to-end processes, introduce automation, and leverage a consistent view of enterprise data to drive the business. When we think about technology, Oracle Cloud is the first public cloud built from the ground up to be a better cloud. We've rethought the core engineering and the systems design, and we've got innovations that solve challenges that our customers had with our on-premise solutions. So with this, we've accelerated the speed to integrate and implement Oracle Cloud with material enhancements at the application, integration, and data layers. So what's the impact? The organization can leverage cloud technology to drive speed, agility, and adoption to fuel the transformation. From an innovation perspective, with Oracle Cloud, you get the latest technological advances when you need it, driven by our significant investment in R&D. We typically deliver new features and functions 4 times a year, building an innovation backlog for every customer on our cloud product. And Oracle Cloud allows you to bring your teams together and experiment with processes, new features and functions, support business model innovation, leveraging our innovations at your pace. So together, across people, process, technology, innovation, the platform enables you to dramatically increase the speed of innovation, right, which results in fueling your transformation. When we think about what the business then will look like when you complete your migration to Oracle Cloud, it's going to be different, right? How you manage people, how you manage your processes, how you think about the end-to-end technology architecture, it's all going to be different, but it's going to be better. And our objective is to make sure that you maximize the results of your journey, right, to drive value. And the value of that migration is pretty compelling. Every customer has the opportunity to transform the business. Understanding the value that you can achieve is the first step. But realizing that value means successfully planning, executing a journey to the cloud that's on time, on budget, with enthusiastic stakeholders and users, right, who love the platform and the product and are excited about their potential opportunities on the product. Securing that type of an outcome requires rigorous preparation. We recognize that for many of our customers, the journey is not one that you've been through or know how to execute. So we've created a framework that addresses the leading practices for Oracle Cloud implementation. And they've been cultivated from our customer experiences. We reviewed our most successful customer implementations. We took a look at those customers that had difficulty, narrowing the focus to kind of 3 primary drivers of success. 1, a bold and inspiring vision and plan for the future. A culture that enables the organization to take advantage of cloud, and that's the focus of our conversation today. And delivery that is executed rigorously and well. And we developed this framework because we want every customer to be successful. So today, our focus is on that middle ring, right? Cloud culture. And what are the leading practices for cloud culture? Our most successful customers recognize that the journey from on-prem to cloud requires a shift in mindset. And I think today, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And maybe I'll kick it off with some of the top of mind, mindset shifts. First is this shift in focus from technology to business outcomes. Many of our customers feel constrained with the capabilities of the existing technology. With cloud, the focus shifts dramatically from what can the technology do for us to what are the business outcomes? How do we achieve them? And how can the technology support us in our objectives? We see this as a shift from from technology led to business led solutioning and designing, right, for business outcomes. Second is the shift from focusing on all the exception cases that exist in the as is state to a focus on driving process standardization. There's this opportunity in your journey where you can tackle the non-standard use cases and asking, why can't we drive a standard process? Do we bring all this complexity from the current state into the new solution? And why can't this be simpler? Third is a shift in expectations. For many organizations, on-premises applications that are on-premise applications, they think of projects as their one opportunity to get business needs met, right? There's often a need to cram as much functionality into a release as possible because major releases are few and far between. With cloud, expectations shift and the business becomes a consumer of cloud. And leveraging our capabilities we're introducing every quarter, you begin to build this approach of continuously introducing new capabilities and consuming cloud at your pace, where the business looks to drive, how can we deliver more capabilities even faster, right, to fuel, right, their outcomes. Fourth, there's this shift from requirements-led thinking, where the team is challenged to find how everything works today in the current state, with the expectation of, well, how do we make all that happen in the new solution? Bending the technology, right, to fit your needs, to a model where the team asks, well, how can the product and its modern best practices that have been built on the experiences of thousands of other customers, how can we make that work for us? We see this as a shift to becoming a great consumer of cloud, where the business evaluates how they can adapt to our Oracle product delivered processes. So those are big top ones. Betsie, what are your thoughts on the last ones?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen me smiling and nodding throughout all of these. We're working with a customer right now who's frankly struggling. Their business has been operating the same way for so long that this last one that you just hit, Bruno, is so tough for them. They want to continue to operate as they have in the past, despite the fact that it's for sure not the most simple way. So at any rate, what supports that mindset shift is a difference in thinking or a change in mindset about how IT works at the direction of the business, right? In my on-prem experience, not to date myself, but like I had to wait for my IT guy to give me the release notes so that I could pick and choose. And if he didn't have time or knew he didn't have a budget, I didn't get those release notes, right? So we ended up being a little bit behind in terms of releases. And the thought was like, well, we'll catch up, Bruno, to your point, with a project. And it's a challenging way to work. As we think about the cloud, it's actually very different. It's a full collaboration, not just with IT and a single business unit, but with multiple business units or multiple thought leaders in the organization, and really looking at those release notes and saying, how do these tie to our overall business objectives or what we're trying to achieve in the next 12, 18, 24, 36 months, right? That actually then lends to the next one, which is, and how much enablement will we need to take on to be able to adopt these? I mean, it has to be a consideration when you think about life in the cloud. In the past, enablement or training took place as part of an event, right? Go live was an event. We trained everybody. We got everybody to sit in a class, and we all wiped our brow. Thank goodness that's over. Now we can all go back to our day jobs. And it's a little bit different when you're in the cloud, because you want to be able to accept that continuous innovation that you talked about earlier, Bruno. And then in addition, you've got to think about, now, how do I get my end users up to speed? The good news is that it's incremental change, right? So it's actually saying to people, oh, you used to do this. We're going to tweak it instead of teach you a whole new way of thinking. That comes with this mindset shift. And ultimately, in the very bottom of the slide, we go from very lengthy, strenuous, challenging projects where we achieve project goals only once, to an implementation where it's very fast. We can get quick wins to celebrate and achieve some of our business vision very fast in a simplified fashion. And we can even put new goals into place that we can achieve, in our first 6 months post go live because we know an innovation's coming that's going to support our business direction, our business objectives. So it can be very different, but I don't want that to scare everyone, because we've got some ways to help you solve that. So let's move into our cloud culture traits, which is that center circle of the dial that Bruno showed. I'm going to go through all of these traits. These are 7 traits that we have identified across hundreds of implementations are present for our customers who thrive in the cloud. So those who live well post go live. And before I go through them, I'll give you the warning. I am going to ask everybody a question at the end. So I want you to be thinking about your organization as we go through these, because that'll help you answer the question. Okay, so the first one is acceleration. You'll probably see Bruno start to really nod on this, like absolutely support this one, because he and I have lived through the implementations where customers are not prepared to make decisions at a rapid pace. And this is imperative. Now, the interesting part is that you can do this as part of an implementation to set that cultural trait up so that it becomes the way you do business post go live. And operating in transparency so that people can make those decisions. You'll see a lot of these traits really start to tie together. Now, I'll come back to transparency because I want to be clear. We would all say, I absolutely want to operate in a transparent culture. I want people to be transparent with each other. And it's typically not the intention of people to operate in any other way, right? But the trick is that you have to identify your stakeholder groups. By the way, not the same as training audiences, but identify your stakeholder groups and over communicate. Be clear across all of those stakeholder groups what is happening, what they should expect, how they can start to build now for the future, even in terms of their own behaviors, right? And here's the trick. If you don't communicate to those stakeholder groups, that says something all in itself. So you've got to operate in transparency. On the versatility side, what you're driving toward is having resources in your organization who are extremely adaptable. It's the difference between asking the question, will I have a job once this system has been implemented? And instead focusing on what am I doing today that I like to do, that I'm good at, that I can do extremely well and add value to the organization in the future. It's that mindset shift at the end user, that the beginning level for all of us, every single person, that they have to go through to actually get to that mindset shift. But we have seen customers thrive who have an organization of people who are willing to raise their hand and try something new. It's really fascinating. Collaboration, I think of this not as collaboration, but as hyper collaboration. One of the things that we see across implementations is that there isn't a recognition of the processes that impact our work that are done by other teams or that we do that impact other teams. And that's one of the things that will become plain and evident in a cloud implementation, because there is no way, you're all sharing the same system. There is no way to silo it off or make your own decisions and kind of throw it over the wall to somebody else and hope they get it. You really have to focus on hyper collaboration. Innovation, we think of innovation as not only an environment that fosters creativity and thinks about things from a human-centered design, but also avoiding a fear of failure, right? So if in fact you've got an innovative culture, people are willing to embrace that continuous improvement that Bruno and I talked about on the previous slide wholeheartedly. And it can be a challenge for sure. But what we find is that those who thrive in the cloud are able to do this. They're able to set aside a fear of failure in favor of ongoing optimization or ongoing improvement. Bruno mentioned simplicity, simplicity. You'll hear us say it over and over and over again. You know, there's a consultant who said the worst phrase that I'll ever hear you say is that's the way we've always done it. because often the way that we've always done it is not the most simple way. And by the way, simple doesn't mean easy, right? It may be difficult or perceived to be difficult because it's different than what has been done forever and ever and ever. So reducing complexity is something that we continue to impress upon our customers. And finally, empowerment. Many times project leaders say, yes, I've empowered people, the right people to make the right decisions, but those people don't feel that empowerment. In fact, it comes back to a little bit of innovation. They're a little bit worried about making the wrong decision. So those are the 7 cloud culture traits. And I think we're ready to ask you a question. So you'll see a poll here, 2 questions in this poll. Which of these traits is most present and least present in your organization? And we'll take a couple minutes so that you can think on that one. I'm always intrigued by this question because person to person, even in the same organization, they might choose different traits, which is always fascinating for me. How are we doing, Alexis?
We still have a few stragglers coming in, but we're
Okay,
almost there.
great.
Yeah, a few more answers, and I think we can publish it.
Perfect. I'm excited to see this one.
Okay, I think we've got it. Hold on.
Okay, cool. All right. Oh, I love this. Okay, well, wow. By and large, collaboration is a strength or most present in organizations. I'm not surprised to hear you say that. We'll actually dive deep into collaboration here in just a few moments. And then least present. Oh, this is so fascinating. Really a two-way tie here, transparency and empowerment. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, Bruno, we see this all the time in projects and with our customers. So really interesting results here. We'll talk about specifically, we'll talk about empowerment. And we could probably answer some questions about transparency as well, as you all have them.
Yeah, maybe
Perfect.
Betsy, a question for you as we depart that slide.
Yeah.
Just setting expectations. Do you in your experience, do you have customers that hit all of these
Oh, that's a
successfully?
great question. Yeah, that's a great question. We have had some customers who rate themselves well in all of these, but not to full and complete presence in their culture. Think of this as a journey, right? There's always room for improvement, and where you might have a strength today, it may be outshined by yet another strength tomorrow, just depending on the business changes that are needed. Market pressures and our industry changes, we're absolutely seeing that impact the behaviors of our people, which are tied to these cultural traits. Thanks, Bruno. Yeah, that's a great question. So what we wanted to do today, just to make this as easy as possible for those of you, especially knowing that about half of you are thinking about how you will make your journey to the cloud, is to focus on just a few of these that you could use in preparation for or even during an implementation. And for those of you in the cloud, these are the ones that we see pop up over and over and over again as the most important cloud culture traits. So those are collaboration, simplicity, and empowerment. And we'll dive into some of the best practices related to each of these. But before we do, can I just give you a glimpse into what great looks like? On the far right-hand side of this slide, there's 3 things that if you could achieve these related to empowerment, simplicity, and collaboration, you'd be well on your way to building these traits in your culture. Bruno asked the question, does anybody have all of them? Typically, no. We did work with one customer who scored themselves so low on all of them, they felt like it was a lost cause, that they would never be able to build them. And that's actually proven itself to not be the case. And some of what they did is in here on the right-hand side. So first and foremost, you have to have leadership support, and leadership has to drive this. And when I say leadership, I'm not talking about just a single leader, right? There has to be a lock arms across the business where they're committed to actually creating a different culture. They're committed to behaving and leading practices that will tie to your cloud culture, right? So this is not just talk the talk, walk the walk, over and over and over again in every single opportunity. This is what I call the hand-to-hand combat of change management, being willing to have those conversations to make sure people are consistently on board and aligned. Which takes us to reinforced and pervasive. There, as I mentioned before, there's a great opportunity for quick wins in a cloud implementation. And you've got to be able to reinforce the positive behaviors and make that pervasive. We had a customer who the CEO knew how important this was. And so he would create videos that he would send out to the entire team to reinforce those small gains, those small wins, because it's that important to publicize the good stuff that's happening. And then finally, measuring alignment. Everybody will say to you, measure, measure, measure. But what we're talking about here is that there is an opportunity to measure the alignment to your cloud culture traits. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. All right, let's keep moving. So best practices, right? Bruno, how do we make these a reality, right? This was you're fine to keep moving. This was what we really felt was the heart of this discussion today. So when we think about empowerment, simplicity, and collaboration, I think it's helpful to do it in the context of what if you're preparing to go to the cloud? What if you're mid-implementation? Or what if you're already thriving in the cloud, right? And I'll start, Bruno, I'll start with empowerment, and then you can jump in with simplicity. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So empowerment, this is, I'll be honest, one of the number one pitfalls that we see across our projects. We have senior leaders who firmly believe that they have empowered the right people to make the right decisions. And yet what we see in practicality is that those people know the decision they want to make, but feel like they've got to go talk to that senior leader to make sure it's okay. And this is a fascinating phenomenon because it can be resolved quite easily. It's not just saying to a person, you are empowered, go make this decision, but it's also setting up the overall governance structure of the project that ideally holds true post go live, right? 85% of our decisions will be made by workstream leads or business process owners, depending on how you look at that. Very small amount, 10% max, will be then escalated to project leadership, and 5% up to the steering committee. That's the ideal scenario. And if you stick to that, you're actually empowering the people that you've put in place to make those decisions. You want to think about it in terms of one badge, one vision, right? So regardless of whether it's an SI, an Oracle partner person in a meeting, or a customer, you're all together striving for the same thing. And how do we work together in a way that's truly empowered and supporting the overall governance? Bruno, what about simplicity?
Yeah, and maybe I was going to ask you a question for the audience before we leave empowerment.
Sure.
Part of the challenge I think that we often see is that an executive is empowered to drive the objectives of their department or group.
Yeah.
I'm empowered to do everything in my power to make sure that finance gets what it needs. I'm empowered to make sure procurement gets its outcomes. And maybe talk a little about how what the struggle it's how do you empower the team to simplify, standardize, collaborate? Like how do you drive that empowerment?
Yeah, it's a good point. It needs to start early on, right? And maybe the best example I can use, we have a customer who identified their business process owners early on. They did a great job, by the way. They chose people who were knowledgeable in their business, but also open-minded, right? Ready and willing to change, and ready and willing to lead the change of others. And when they did so, they empowered them for sure, But what I don't think any of them realized was that they weren't just empowered to think about their process, then they had to connect to other processes. So the upstreams and the downstreams, so that they could start to get to this full vision of how do they run their business, right? And it's that is part of the how. You've got to get the right people in place. You've got to get them connected so that they understand they're not just responsible for the decisions in the project, right? They are responsible for making sure the business can achieve its vision now, in implementation, and after implementation. Those folks shouldn't be redeployed back to whatever job they had before. It should be that they are still a business process owner. And
Yeah,
Bruno,
that is
I was just going to say, I think it ties directly to simplicity,
simplicity. Exactly.
because you cannot have one without the other.
Yeah, and simplicity is just so important. It is the outcome. You only achieve it as an outcome of a focus on a clear vision and plan, empowerment of a team that understands the outcomes and are willing to and empowered to
Yeah,
implement the simple solutions required,
yeah,
right, to deliver on time, on budget with raving excited end users.
yeah.
And so when you think about simplicity, it's probably one of the harder things to do well. You really have to orchestrate your team to get it right. And if I connect it to, if you think about the most popular brands, right, and their messaging in the market, they're not complex messages. If you think about an implementation, you're doing a transformation, it's got to be simple, not only to the audience that needs to consume it, right, your business stakeholders and end users, but to the team that's got to deliver it, right? So
Mm-hmm,
the outcome's got to be simple. The plan and approach has got to be simple. One, two,
mm-hmm,
three, four, we get it live. Now, there's a lot
mm-hmm.
of work that goes into that, right? You got to plan aggressively. You've got to really think about your deployment approach. How do I start with something that's simple, achievable, and to win? How do you simplify the solution by making some big assumptions on where can you simplify and standardize process across regions, across
Mm-hmm.
lines of business,
Yes.
certainly across departments that are leveraging the platform. And then, if you think about it, Oracle has spent a lot of time and energy to drive standardization of processes within the platform that are end to end. They all interconnect. And so, how can this empowered team begin to make decisions to leverage those product delivered processes and not introduce complexity?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly every project, maybe this is a question for you, Betsy. Every project hits that point. I think, in the old days, we would call it the pit of despair, right? You hit that point where you're like, oh my gosh, how do we achieve these outcomes given these big decisions that we have to make? Just to connect empowerment,
Yeah,
simplicity, and collaboration, which is the next topic.
yeah,
I think that the only way you get through those tough decisions is you have to bring them all three together,
yeah, yeah.
right? So maybe talk a little about
Wholeheartedly.
how collaboration is just so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, wholeheartedly, right? And it's interesting because you hear us talking about being able to move at the speed of cloud related to process, right? And it's because from Oracle's perspective, this is the kernel of change, right? If you can get everybody to align on processes. So this happens in empowerment, in simplicity, and then yes, absolutely in collaboration. What we find is that those customers who live well in the cloud, meaning they're continuously updating their systems, but in a way that supports their business objectives, right? They're taking into account their overall initiatives. What are we trying to achieve at our highest level of strategy? And how can the technology support that? This only is possible through connectedness in your organization. And I said earlier, I think of it as hyper collaboration. Said differently, I think of it, I often ask the question when I'm doing this live, how many of you have collaborated today? 100% of the room will raise their hand. When I say, how many of you have collaborated today with somebody outside of your natural team? The most I can get usually is about 50%. You have to be in this cloud life, you have to be willing to pick up the phone and make relationships with people who are not in your natural teams, because that's actually what drives this collaboration. And then, Bruno, to your point, continues down the path of simple business processes, continues to be connected to the overall business objectives. I mean, Bruno, I don't know about you, but I feel like post-COVID, we are seeing businesses having to change. C-suites are showing up, leaving the office on a Friday and showing up on a Monday and being given a new challenge that they have to deal with. The only way you can do that is if you're operating in a very simple manner in a highly collaborative culture. At least those two things are true from what I see. What do you see? What's your commentary on that?
Well, I think I resonate on one of the comments you made earlier around the majority of the big decisions, right, are made by this empowered team. And so if you think about it, it's how do you get the team to not escalate every decision?
Yes.
Right. Certainly you've got maybe you've got a community of stakeholders you're engaging, you're testing ideas, you're iterating with them, but how do you empower them? That requires this collaboration model to actually work, because you can't make a decision in a vacuum.
Yes.
And so, if you think about a customer that's done that really well, really has gotten that 80, I think you mentioned, was it 85%?
85, yeah.
85% of decisions to be made in this collaboration team. How'd they do it? Right? What was the key to their success?
You're reading my mind, because as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, I've got this great customer story I want to share. So it's interesting. We worked with a customer who had started an implementation and had run into some challenges. We came in specifically interested in their cloud culture. And when we worked through our cloud culture survey and our workshop, it was evident to us that they had an empowerment challenge. So we were clear with them. We said to that C-suite, hey, you may think that you've told everybody that they can make the decisions, but they don't feel like that. And you've got to adjust something. By the way, I'll just mention industry overlay here. They're in healthcare. Healthcare as an industry is a perfectionist industry, right? They're actually promoted and do well in their career if they do not change, right? So now we're saying to them, wait, now you have to change. It's like, it's oil and water, right? I mean, the two things just don't combine. So at any rate, this C-suite, I have to say, I mean, we gave them our vision of like, if you can't solve this, your project will pause. And so I have credit to those leaders. They jumped in a way that I have not seen most of our senior leaders in the organizations that we work with dive into an implementation. They were reviewing decisions with their people and truly helping them understand they were empowered to make that decision, to keep the decisions moving. But the tactical part of this, Bruno, this means we're adding meetings to our internal for our customers, internal meetings to their calendar, so that they can have these alignment sessions all along the way and keep progress moving.
And at the end of the day, the accountability, of course, is with the executive team, the C-suite, to ensure that these three capabilities work together. Thought I'd bring up an example. Betsie and I worked for a customer, and they empowered their team. They had global process owners. They had a simplified design, because really the only way they were going to achieve the value case is if they kept it simple, and they built a collaboration structure with their partners. And that executive that we worked for kept their team true to achieving the objectives anytime they deviated from the simplicity goal, right? It meant that there was an empowerment or a collaboration problem. And it quickly had to be summarized and go, why can you, the team, not figure this out, right? And then he would facilitate a session to make all that happen. But it is bottoms up, but it also has to be measured and monitored top down. And I think one of the comments you made, it was make it measurable. And a couple different ways to make it measurable. I'll throw one out there, and maybe Betsie, you can. One way to make it measurable is, what's the degree of variance from the simplified approach, whether that's deployment approach, whether that's the roadmap, whether that's the solution architecture, any variations from simple right, means that
Mm-hmm.
there's some challenge that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
discussed. What
Mm-hmm.
what other kind
Yeah.
of metrics have you seen be successful?
Yeah. So absolutely all of those. And then I'm going to lean to the people side, right? You need to be able to measure how your people are feeling. So we worked with a customer. They were taking 80 businesses who had grown through acquisition, and those businesses have been told, keep on doing what you're doing. You're amazing at what you do in your region. Keep doing it. But you all can, forecast what happened, right? Ultimately, they needed to get to standard processes so they could report their financials. And when they did that, it became, a real challenge. And their people in the first, we did a sentiment survey for them based on their own cloud culture results. And the first month, those results were, I like to say, sunshine and lollipops and rainbows. Everybody was very excited about the vision of the project and the initiative, what they would be able to do, how they would be able to work with their sister businesses in new ways that they had never been able to before. And I mean, people really thinking to the future vision of what they were trying to achieve. And then the second month, the results were not nearly as positive because at that point, work had begun in the project. And all of a sudden, they were feeling the pressure of how do I keep up with my day job and also be a contributing member to this team. And I'll say this: the CEO was on the steerco, and he was particularly interested in these results because that overwhelmed feeling happening in month two, he knew could not be pervasive throughout the entire length of the project. So he was able to take some action based on that measurement of how are people feeling. And it's interesting, excuse me, the anonymity of that survey allowed people to be more honest than they would actually speak to each other or project leaders.
That's fantastic.
It's interesting,
Well, so that's
right?
a good segue then
It
to
is.
next slide
Yeah.
around how we help.
Yeah, what we can do. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is helping people get comfortable. It's back to the Safra quote that we saw at the very beginning, helping people get comfortable with change. They all are in favor of change, but now they've got to change something about themselves, their daily work, and getting them comfortable. So let's move on to the next one, and we can just talk a little bit about what are our recommendations when it comes to this. So first and foremost, drive change from day one. What we find is that clients who actually approach change and cloud culture and making that mindset shift that we've talked about throughout the past 43 minutes, making that a reality, whether you're in implementation or not, you could be on either side of it, is important, right? You've got to create the space to get people more comfortable with doing work in new ways. Embracing new cultural traits. I take you back to the customer who said, we're not doing any of these well. We think we should throw in the towel. And we actually help them come up with their own action plan. What traits could they start to work on? How could we reinforce that in the implementation so that they become a way of life? And it's not something you have to over-index on, right? And then finally, empowering the acceleration. I think this is very tactically challenging for many of our customers because they have to really think beyond go live. They have to kind of think to their future, and making those decisions in a really fast pace. It's tough to do. So we can help with all of this. We've helped our customers with cloud culture assessments and workshops and then action plans so that they can kind of get their heads around what does this mean for our business. And I'll be clear that the outcomes and the recommendations we make coming out of those workshops are tailored. So they truly are relevant to the business itself, to the organization. We want it to stick. We want all of our Oracle customers to thrive in the cloud.
Maybe a question before we leave that slide.
Yeah.
Betsie, when should our customers begin thinking about cloud culture and this change and the traits and how they accelerate?
Yeah.
When do they have to start thinking about it?
Yeah, well, it's never too late and it's never too early. That's what I would say. If we could get everybody, it's funny, for a few years now, even at Cloud World, we've talked about these traits as things to start to think about. And I say to customers all the time, choose one, and go after it, right? Because you may not be able to achieve all 7 in the course of a year, for example, but if you choose one and you really focus on it, and you start to focus on what will this change in our business? How can we embrace this? Not just around your technology projects, right? But across all of your initiatives, that will actually gain more ground. But don't leave it to the end. Please, please, please. Don't leave it to the end. At the point where you say, okay, now it's time to start training, not the time to start thinking about cloud culture. I mean, yes, it's never too late, but you have missed an opportunity to start to talk to people about this earlier on. And sometimes that's the most comforting thing. They just want to know what's coming. They just don't want to live in the unknown. And you can start to build some of these behaviors through cloud culture traits early on. Good question. Good question. Bruno, you want to talk through the takeaways before we open up for Q&A?
So, in our discussion today, hopefully you all now see that it's more than just a technology project and a software upgrade. You really have to think through these new ways of working, right? How do you maximize the value that you're going to get out of your migration to cloud? And if you do it well, you're simplifying the solution, you're collaborating, and we as business leaders, I mean, that is what brings joy to many of us, right? Collaborating, innovating, and driving new outcomes. And culture is just such a core component of doing that. So hopefully, and allows you to better, build the muscles to reimagine your business on the cloud. So there's some, key traits that you should take into account. We highlighted a couple of the most important ones. Recognize that it's, how you organize the people and the culture around them that's going to get you there. And then if you need any support to get you there, we have services available to help you. And they begin all the way early in the process where you're evaluating our technology and making that decision, should I stay or should I go? So we're willing to assist at any point in time.
Yeah, and Bruno, if I can just pose a question back to you, if we think about those 3 rings you showed at the beginning, there's a direct tie here to vision, right? So at what point are we thinking about the behaviors, the culture traits in relation to the vision? I know those are 2 different rings in your circle there, but I don't they work together?
Yeah. Well, so we started this with every journey to the cloud is an opportunity to transform. And most of the executives that I work with, build a transformation program that has a very compelling vision, right? They have to not only sell to the stakeholders, make everyone internally excited, but the board and the rest of the C-suite. And to do that, ultimately the messaging has got to be simple. We're going to do the following transformation to drive the following outcome. And so just to support, right, the objectives, you've got to immediately then think about, have I created the environment to facilitate that type of innovation? Right. And there are lots of decisions you have to make. What's the roadmap? What's technology? Do I have the right, products on the bill of materials? Have I negotiated, how my SIs go? But the next step after that vision and plan is, have I created an environment that will support the innovation? And that is cloud culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's an element there of, and how much change have we already endured? How much can we continue to endure? If COVID taught us anything, humans are very resilient. We've just got to be, pushed to it sometimes to be in that uncomfortable space.
Yeah. Well, and since that time, we've had, economic, acceleration, then deceleration, and now you're kind of stalling, and all of that drives this need to be flexible and agile, and all of that requires a great culture.
Yeah. So if you think about it earlier on, you're far better off. Absolutely.
Certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so, in our discussion, we've had 2 topics now on the webinars. The first one started with What does great delivery confidence look like? Then we talked about cloud culture. The third ring is around delivery. And we're going to have a webinar in April. We're going to get several leaders from Oracle to talk about in that delivery circle, how do you align business process, right? What are the best ones? How do you simplify and standardize and then introduce automation to help power the transformation? So hopefully everyone can join us for that meeting. Well, I think we've got about 10 minutes. No, we're right on the dot
Yeah,
for
perfect.
Q&A. So maybe we'll open up the chat board, or were any questions posted yet, Alexis?
No, but please feel free to jot them in the chat for everyone. And Bruno and
Yeah,
Betsy would be happy to answer them.
yeah,
Yeah, so as you guys
absolutely.
are doing that, maybe I'll pose a question to you, Betsy.
Sure.
A common question we have from our customers is, how do we recognize we need a new way of working.
Mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm.
got an innovation, a roadmap, and an outcome that we want to drive. But what's the first thing I need to do, right?
Yeah,
What's the first thing we need to do to get started?
yeah. Yeah, I love this question because I absolutely want to be in the scenario where we're thinking ahead, right? So here's what I would say. Please get the word out. Do not wait. um, there is a compelling reason often that I hear from project teams where they say, I don't want to say anything until I have enough detail to make it really crystal clear. But what we have found is that there are ways to talk through that vision, make that vision very real for end users as early as possible. And so that's what I would say, Bruno, is start to think about how you can communicate this. I mean, truly, this is like, how can you say it in an elevator pitch, right? 3 sentences or less. What are we trying to achieve, and why is that a good thing for everybody in the organization? That's the very first thing. Please don't miss the opportunity to communicate that vision and the benefit. That would be my first thing.
I love the elevator pitch concept, and you get to practice it, rehearse it, and fine tune it
Yeah,
over time.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So I think we did get a question in
Yeah.
the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend cloud-based solutions for mission-critical applications such as hospitals? So I think we
Mm-hmm.
broaden that to providers.
Yeah,
Now, Betsy, you just recently went through
yeah.
this with a provider. Maybe you can talk about that experience.
Yeah, sure. So yes, absolutely. I would say hospitals are a great use case for cloud apps. We have actually implemented at some of the most renowned hospitals in the country, of various types. And one of them even went live during COVID, if you can imagine that. So yes, we absolutely recommend a cloud-based solution for hospitals and lots of other areas in healthcare too. Don't take me too far off the beaten path here of hospitals. We've done a lot of work with healthcare customers. But the interesting part is that not only do we recommend it, we find that they actually discover their own efficiencies, and again, embracing simplicity by going through that implementation. We worked with one customer who not only was a hospital, also a manufacturer, and so had their own warehousing capabilities, et cetera. And they were actually able to streamline their own supply chain by pulling in cloud software. So they got to the point where they could actually reduce the amount of variability in supplies, et cetera, just by using cloud software, Oracle's ERP solution, finance to supply chain.
Yeah, I would agree. What we're finding is to modernize and innovate on rev cycle.
Yeah.
Many providers are connecting their, whether they use Epic or Cerner or another solution
Mm-hmm.
to ERP Cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
To harden their and modernize their rev cycle processes. In addition, right, with the focus on value-based care, there's an additional need for analytics and analysis around, financials and the financial impact of that.
That's right.
We're seeing a lot in supply chain, and then certainly talent. Talent is a challenge with every provider that we talk to. I would say if you looked at the top 10 providers in the United States, they're all right evaluating a migration to cloud or have already moved.
Yeah.
Same thing for the top 10 payers. And so it's a very active market. So absolutely, they see Oracle Cloud Solutions as a mission critical solution for them.
Yeah. Even Bruno, I'd add medical device manufacturers. You look at the top 5 to 7, many of them are already on an Oracle Cloud of some sort, right? It's pervasive in the healthcare industry. Yes. Yeah.
Any
Well,
other questions?
I was just going to say,
No.
I don't see any other questions, but Bruno, maybe I can ask you a question that tends to be a burning one when we do these. So how do you, as we think about that mission critical aspect, how do you resource these projects, not just during implementation, but to have a really smooth ongoing operational model so that a customer can thrive in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean that is one of the earliest and toughest decisions an executive needs to make, right? And I love the nature of mission critical. I think step one is you have to put your A team on it. This is not a technology project, and we're going to get the next PM who's available to shepherd it. You get your trusted advisors and executives from within the organization. You identify your top talent, right? 1 that can innovate, 2 that can drive change, 3 that can simplify, and 4 that has a great network and can collaborate, right? Because these projects do not get done without good collaboration. If we think about providers, just using this one because it was the last question, right? Negotiating process change across presidents of individual hospitals is difficult. Very difficult. It takes a very strong team to do that. And if you think about HCM and its time and labor, right, that is the touch point, right, between that provider and the platform. And you've got to have a strong team. So it takes one hand-picking executives that have a network within the organization, but then 2, I like to think of it as you've got to be self-aware of what are the strengths and weaknesses of my own team. Okay. And, having that awareness to know when you need help, know when you need to hire, and know when you need to partner. And we actually do facilitate that conversation early when you're evaluating our products to help you drive those decisions. But it's just so important that you build a great team as opposed to, right, if I think about some of the challenges some of our customers have is, hey, person ABC is available. Let's go make that person responsible for driving this change. Right?
Yes.
It's absolutely.
Yeah. And in those scenarios, Bruno, what do we see, right? We see that person gets through a small stretch in the project, but ultimately it becomes someone else who has to carry that through. I mean, I think there was a finance leader who was responsible for the GL change. It was prompted by a review from the implementation, but it wasn't necessarily a technology change. And he did town halls, I mean, department to department in the hospital to actually go socialize this. And he did about 3 rounds. So you need those people, Bruno. Yeah, I think your point is spot on. You need those people who have a good network and are strong and take those messages through.
Oh, that's a great example. If I think about my best client, after every workshop, right, this particular project was global. He either hopped on a phone or hopped on a plane. And he went to that stakeholder group and just said, this is what we just designed. Isn't this amazing? How can we make this work for you? Right. And really try to sell it internally. And that's the job, right, for that leader. Well, Alexis, I think we are at time. So back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Bruno and Pam, for generously sharing your expertise with us and collaborating with Quest. to offer this insightful series to our community. Just a quick reminder, following today's session, we would kindly ask for your feedback through a brief survey. And then just as Bruno mentioned earlier, we will have our last session on April 10th with a focus on best processes to leverage for cloud. So we look forward to seeing you then and wishing you a wonderful rest of your day.